Why is it that humanity has gotten slower in the last 30 years? You want to go out and actually build a business that is showing the power of capitalism as a force for good. The responsibility of any leader in business is to grow that business, to take care of all of your stakeholders, help new businesses get started in order to develop the next generation of companies that are creating value in the world. Last year, there was the lowest approval rating of capitalism in America since they started doing this survey. It's actually under 50% for the first time of people in America who support capitalism. We want to change that.
Welcome to Liberty Spenders. Today's guest is Alexander McCobin. He's the founder and CEO of the Liberty Ventures Network, of which I am a member, where he connects investors, executives, and entrepreneurs committed to using capitalism as a force for good. Alexander's got a background in philosophy and economics. He's built communities that blend business success with purpose and liberty. He co-founded Students for Liberty, growing it into a global movement, empowering young leaders, and later led Conscious Capitalism Incorporated, inspiring leaders to align profit with higher purpose. Through Liberty Ventures, he continues to champion ethical entrepreneurship, values-driven leadership, and principled investing, driving both financial growth and positive impact. Alexander, it's awesome to have you on the show.
Kurt, so excited to be on the podcast with you today. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I've been excited about this. I even drove all through the night, getting here at 3 a.m. so we could make sure, we could do this episode. So I'm really pumped about it. We are members of Liberty Ventures and have found it to be really cool. But I know part of what you're doing is promoting capitalism as a genuine force for good. And, some people think, capitalism isn't a force for good. Maybe it's a force for greed or a force for, the kind of force that creates things like our 2008 financial crisis. How did you kind of come to this belief about capitalism being force for good? Is it something you came on casually? It was a passion you developed in college? How did all that get grooving?
So you're absolutely right. The premise of not just Liberty Ventures, but my mission in life is to show people how capitalism is fundamentally a force for good. And it's something that I came to early on in life. When I joined the debate team in high school, I started asking for all these philosophical books to prepare myself for it, like John Rawls's Theory of Justice, John Locke's Second Treatise, and my dad gave me a copy of Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand for my 14th birthday to go along with them. And that really set me on the path of exploring the meaning of capitalism, liberty, and what justice and morality really means. That did lead me, as you said, to almost become a philosophy professor at one point, but then realized that there's so much to be done, not just with the intellectual foundations of what constitutes a free and purposeful society, which is what capitalism is all about, but to actually go and instantiate that in the world, to help more people live out the principles of a free society of capitalism and of purpose in their lives. And that set me off on a completely different path than what I expected when I was 14.
Yeah, well, then you and I have some things in common, that we were the nerdy kids in high school, right? Who are reading books about capitalism instead of the cooler kids reading comic books. So I get where that comes from. I was the kid who brought the briefcase to high school. So
I had a briefcase for debate tournaments as well.
Yeah, there we go. Well, I just kind of feel like, even as somebody who's pretty I'm pro free market, pro capitalism, there's a headline almost every week of some kind of, fair or unfair situation. Somebody who seems to be in it all for the money and gets themselves caught up in bad things and hurt people around them and, maybe lose people's savings. How do we, so the obvious, it seems like somewhat obvious response to that is, well, capitalism is bad. We need to rein in all of these people who are just going to exploit the poor and the weak, and that, a system that's run by a pretty strong set of rules by our government and our politicians, which are elected by the normal people, not just the rich people, is a better situation. So how, I don't agree with it, but it has a certain logic to it. How do you explain that? How do you talk to somebody who sees the world that way?
it first off starts by being really clear about what capitalism is and what it's not, because for most people, they have a fundamental misunderstanding of the meaning of capitalism. They associate capitalism with just anyone who happens to have a business entity and engages in fraud, theft, extortion from people. And so they think the Bernie Madoffs and the Enrons of the world are capitalism itself, when they're really not even capitalists. Those are examples of people who are abusing the system and trying to take advantage of it, not really creating value, but taking advantage of other people who are doing so, extracting value from others. So it begins by just being very clear that capitalism is an economic system whereby individuals have the agency to decide what they produce and who they trade their production with. It's about the free and voluntary production and trade of goods and services. Full stop. As opposed to what came before capitalism, systems like feudalism, where people were forced to create things dictated to them from central authorities who owned all the land and the means of production, or mercantilism, where they had a little more freedom, but still a central agency said what was most valuable that they were going to extract from them, or more recent iterations of central control with socialism, communism, and like systems that really get back to the same point. And so what's amazing about capitalism is that it's premised on certain foundational principles that everyone can agree to and fundamentally does, like respect for individual agency, the idea that each person is an end in ourselves and so has the right to decide what we value, what we spend our time on, and who we work with. Other principles too, like mutual cooperation, finding win-win-win opportunities. The only way you and I are going to do a trade with each other is if we both agree to it, meaning if we both feel we're better off for it, and finding ways to facilitate more trades like that. So for me, it really begins with clarifying what capitalism is and differentiating that from the misunderstandings of both the system and who really represents the system of capitalism, the people themselves, so that the public doesn't think it's just evil, greedy, destructive individuals that they typically associate it with.
Yeah. I always thought that Mike Huckabee said it interesting when he ran for president, is that we shouldn't confuse the free market with big business.
Yes.
And they often have contrary interests. I give this illustration from my personal life. I remember not long after we started our business, we wanted to one of our clients won a seat in Congress, and the U.S. House, when you get elected, makes a website for each member of Congress, and it's hosted on a .gov, and it's paid for by the public. So our client had won, and he wanted to hire us to build the website. Well, what I found was there was an approval process to go through because you're building on a .gov, and you had to make sure of security protocols, and the approval process was rigorous and ridiculous, and it took forever. And there was sort of an incentive on the part of the U.S. House of Administration to make it hard. They didn't want more people doing it, and I felt like it was unjust. I want the freedom. My client wanted the freedom to hire me, and so we fought. Finally took a direct call from a member of Congress to the House admin to get the work done. And what I thought was interesting is once I got on the other side of that, and now I had an approved vendor to build house websites, the kind of corrupt crony system that kept me out now became my ally, because I didn't want new competitors either once I was in. And it's always been a good illustration of there are certain people in the market who feel like they get an advantage out of a type of cronyism and anti-competitive behavior. They want more licensing. They want more regulation because it benefits them, and it keeps competitors out of the scene because it raises the costs of new entrants. And so, to your point, there are ways to sort of manipulate the system by people who aren't in it for value creation as much as they're in it for profit maximization for themselves.
100%. And that works at the level of analysis and argument. But you and I both know people aren't just persuaded by great arguments. We also have to look at the narratives by which people understand the world and their experiences and tackle that too. And on the narrative front, it's understandable that a lot of people dislike capitalism because that's what they hear from the media, from Hollywood, from what's typically discussed in academia and just is in the ether. And part of that is, unfortunately, on business people as well, because a lot of business leaders haven't done a good job telling their own story to the world, explaining why they started a business in the first place, what they're trying to do to positively impact their communities, their employees, their customers in what they're doing. And that's why one of the things I really am passionate about is getting more business leaders to have the courage to speak up and be willing to share what they're doing to put more positive stories of business out there in the world.
I think so important. And I'm sure that's part of the motivation behind now the creation of Liberty Ventures. And so talk a little bit about that journey. When did Liberty Ventures start? What was the genesis of the idea? Maybe for folks who aren't as familiar, talk about what it is.
So Liberty Ventures is a network for investors, executives, entrepreneurs, anyone in business really, who is committed to this idea that capitalism is fundamentally good and wants to be a great representative of it through their actions, advocate for it in what they discuss, and collaborator in it to build their businesses. And this came about really from my entire career. As you said, after philosophy, I built up a nonprofit, Students for Liberty, and through that got connected with an incredible business leader, John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods, who published a book, Conscious Capitalism, and started a nonprofit to spread it. And that really was where I developed the idea for Liberty Ventures, because on the one hand, conscious capitalism as a philosophy I absolutely love, and I'm still an adherent to. But there are a lot of people who hear that term and think it's an apology for business rather than a defense of it. And that was a limiting factor for growing the organization. But the other thing I realized is that any good business leader who wants to make a positive impact in the world doesn't just want to be a part of a nonprofit talking about that in the abstract. You want to go out and actually build a business that is showing the power of capitalism as a force for good. And the responsibility of any leader in business is to grow that business, to take care of all of your stakeholders. And so the Liberty Ventures is set up explicitly to facilitate business growth. Some of that through investing between our members, some of that by sharing best practices between them, and a lot of it facilitating relationships to actually be partners to attract the right talent, to help new businesses get started in order to develop the next generation of companies that are creating value in the world, and doing so as a way to show the power of capitalism as a force for good. And that gets really to the last thing I was saying before. We need business people who are going to represent capitalism well, who are going to take its principles and apply it in the way that they do business, so that the lived experience of employees, of customers, of the public is that these businesses are great. They love these businesses, and they understand the connection then to capitalism as a system as a whole.
If you're listening to this show, it's probably because you understand something most people don't. Marketing to Liberty spenders isn't just about ads or tactics, it's about trust. And in the real world, trust moves through relationships. And that's why private introductions and deal flow are such a core part of what we do.
So FastPass is a private introduction and deal flow network for Christian and conservative leaders who already have influence and want to scale fast. It's not open networking, it's intentional introductions between people who already share alignment. We've seen one client land a $25,000 opportunity from a single introduction. Another told us that FastPass has become his largest source of referrals, not because of volume, but because of fit. And yet another closed her equity round at a key moment just due to the right introduction.
When you book a one-to-one consult with us, we're not handing you a list or making big promises. Instead, we're having a real conversation about what you're building, who you want to meet, and whether FastPass makes sense for this season for you. So no pressure, no hustle, and no awkward pitch from us.
Yeah. If you're ready to grow through relationships instead of forcing everything on your own, head to libertyspenders.com/FastPass and book a one-to-one consult with us.
In worst case, you leave with clarity. Best case, the right introductions change the trajectory of what you're building.
Okay, back to the episode.
Well, and I think you said almost offhand to me just a couple weeks ago when we were talking, 25,000 people part of the network in some fashion.
That's right.
Which is no small network at all.
I appreciate that. It is tremendous to see the interest that there is in business leaders coming together with others who share their values and these commitments. But it is just a drop in the bucket for where we want to go. Our vision is to build a movement of 1 million capitalists who are actually for capitalism. And this is the starting point for us to build that up.
Yeah. What I think is interesting too, I know as a member of the network, there's a lot of discussion about funding, and different people with startup ideas get chances to present to other members, and there's done virtually and in person. But one of the coolest things I didn't know until just before we got on was that one of your members is Angel Studios, and they were the first member of yours to go public.
That's right. So proud of the Harmon brothers and everyone over at Angel Studios with what they've accomplished. And they are a great example of what we're doing. What I love about Angel Studios is that the Harmon brothers are great advocates of capitalism. They went into starting Angel Studios because they wanted to make a lot of money in the first place. They just believed in the power of capitalism as a force for good and said they wanted to create content that they could show their kids, that they could show their families, and the market wasn't delivering it. So they were going to do it themselves. And what they've now accomplished in building out this tremendous portfolio of movies and TV shows and a process that I think is so innovative through their guild system, where members and viewers are actually giving input on and deciding what they're going to produce, is just incredible. And they continue to, and while the company itself isn't always promoting a message of liberty, they tie that in with a lot of the things they do as well, like with the Sound of Freedom and Young Washington. And the content is about just virtuous character, which we need right now. So they really are a great example of the ability for business leaders to represent and model the power of capitalism as a force for good.
Well, I'm a big fan. I'm a member of their guild. I highly recommend Angel Studios to anyone, family who's looking for great content. For years, you could find sort of moral or faith-based content out there. It was often not something your kids wanted to engage with. But Angel's been putting out some amazing stuff. My wife and I went and saw the movie David in theater with our kids, and they're 3 and 5. It's the first time we actually took them to the theater. We weren't sure how they'd handle like a giant big screen and all that. And they absolutely loved it. They wanted to come back for the sing along. Now every morning is no more Elsa and Anna songs. Thank God. I was so tired of Let It Go. And now they want to hear the David soundtrack, all from the great content that Angel Studios has done. And I think shows the power of the network, and what you're building here is this sort of opportunity for collective action as well. When you have 25,000 members, different people you can tap into. Going public is not something you do on your own, right? You need a lot of people buying in, a lot of guild members, a lot of people buying your product, a lot of investors. And I think it's so powerful, building something that supports that.
That's absolutely right, Kurt. And I'll give a couple of examples of the connections with Angel Studios. We got connected to them through one of the investors in our network who said that we should be in touch with each other, and we were able to work with them at that level. But then also they came and spoke at our first Principled Business Summit. My gosh, almost 2 years ago at this point. And we introduced them to the founder and CEO of a company called Look Cinemas, Brian Schultz, amazing CEO who was really the pioneer of the idea of movie theaters meets restaurants back in the day with Studio Movie Grill. And Look Cinemas is his latest concept. And now Look Cinemas is one of the places that Angel Studios often premieres its movies nowadays. And they do incredible business with each other because we were able to introduce them at a conference, but they share a common commitment to the same values. They know that they're both trying to be great representatives of capitalism. They're trying to build communities in a meaningful way. And that common commitment leads to an ability to develop trust and an ability to do business with each other a lot more easily than just any random person that you meet at a generic industry conference. That's the opportunity with a values-based network like Liberty Ventures.
I don't think you can undervalue or underestimate just how valuable that is, right? If anything I've learned in 20 years in business, you can do a lot of spray and pray, right? You can sell your product to everyone. You could try to encourage everyone to invest and take a company like Angel Studios. They're in entertainment. Everybody watches movies. Everybody watches TV shows. So you could fall easily into the trap of my target market is everyone. My potential investor is everyone. But getting in a room with people who not just are looking for economic value, right, but are aligned with you on values, I think, skips a lot of wasted time, a lot of wasted money on folks that just aren't the right fit.
100%. And the one amendment I would make to what you said, Kurt, is that economic value is important. Profit is a great thing. We want to be really clear about that. It powers businesses. It powers human flourishing, frankly. But there's this interesting situation where when people put profit as the sole thing that they're focused on or just making money, and they don't think about the way they get to that, it often leads to an unprofitable situation. Whereas putting your values first and what change you're trying to bring about in the world, the purpose of the company first, in my experience and as our philosophy in general, is actually a better way of generating profit. Now, this is something I took from my conscious capitalism days. That's one of the big things John Mackey talks about a lot. But we've seen this happen over and over again. So I think it's really important to be clear to everyone here that knowing what your values are and wanting to work with other people who share your values is actually a better way of generating the economic return rather than working with people who explicitly are just trying to make a quick buck and may not actually know how they're going to do that effectively and are not going to be good long-term partners for economic return.
Yeah. Well, I love talking about Angel Studios, and I could do a whole 45 minutes. In fact, I need to get one of the Harmons on our podcast. That would be awesome. And
well, let's talk about that after this, then.
Yeah, I could thank them in person for their great content. Another cool story, which I got to hear about because this seems like a weird 2026 only kind of idea here. One of your companies that's involved with Liberty Ventures is putting together a process to use jet engines for AI data centers. What is that?
So Boom Supersonic and their founder, Blake Scholl, is another one of my favorite stories in the network. So Blake, the founder, had no experience in aerospace engineering to begin with. He was a computer software engineer, built up a company, got sold to Groupon, and was working there for a couple of years. But at a certain point, he just felt like his soul was being crushed. He was spending his life helping people get discounts on things they didn't need. And he started to ask himself, is this really what I'm going to do the rest of my life? Or should I figure out some way to make a meaningful contribution to the world? And so left without any idea for what he would do, but he had always loved jets. I don't know if he was flying at that point or not as a pilot, but he asked himself, why is it that humanity has gotten slower in the last 30 years? When the Concorde disappeared, we lost commercial supersonic travel. Is there a way that we can bring that back? And when he started studying aerospace engineering, he thought to himself, I could do this in a way that no one else has done it before. And so from his basement, he started building a company. And over 10 the 13 years now, he's built the company up to the point where he actually was able to test the first privately developed supersonic jet last year, which is just an incredible in and of itself. And the cool thing about the jet and everything that they've redesigned is that it actually doesn't have a sonic boom. It's silent as it goes through the air, which is critical for being able to fly over land so that it doesn't disturb people. The Concorde wasn't allowed to do that before, which limited its routes. So he's already developed one incredible innovation that's going to open up more profit-generating opportunities with the supersonic jet they're developing at Boom. But in order to get there, they also redesigned the engine. They came up with a whole new way to process fuel and to make it more efficient and develop the jet. I don't know all the specifics. I'm not a tech expert in aerospace or engines, but Blake has become one. And at a certain point, as he was reading things in the news about all these AI data centers needing more energy, needing greater efficiency, he thought to himself, I wonder if our engine could be applied to that too, and reached out to Sam Altman at OpenAI, pitched the idea, and he said within 15 minutes got a text back, yes, here's the people to talk to. And so he's using the same technology that they're going to have in their supersonic jets to now power AI data centers, and he's using that to generate the revenue to get them to commercialization for their Overture jet in the next few years, which is just an incredible development here. And Blake is such a passionate fan of capitalism and the principles of liberty. That's why he's doing this in the first place. He's exactly the kind of entrepreneur that we want to support, whose values aligned, and coming up with incredibly innovative ways to push humanity forward, make us literally go faster.
Well, both of these stories are amazing, but if I'm a liberty-minded entrepreneur and I'm sort of early in my career, I'm not building jet engines. Maybe I have a smaller idea. I'm not going to make a hit Hollywood movie. How do most people interact with Liberty Ventures? What's their experience like? How would let's call us normies. How do us normies, benefit from being part of the network?
You touched on some of the flashier companies in the Liberty Ventures network. Absolutely. That's why we love talking about them. But honestly, I love the members of the network who aren't getting so much media attention, who people don't interact with on such a regular basis, because it's the smaller businesses and the people who are just starting out that really are driving the future and what capitalism is all about. And that's why we have events to bring people together, ranging from intimate summits like an investor summit we just did in Dallas to larger conferences like our Principal Business Summit coming up in October in Austin, Texas, to bring people together, facilitate relationship building and ways to work together, as well as then bring people into different memberships that we have to work with each other. For example, later today, I've got a mastermind that we're running where we're going to be bringing together CEOs of companies in the network to share the challenges that they're facing and come up with ideas to help each other improve what they're doing and scale their businesses, but also run pitch competitions for startups in order for them to get exposure to the network and not just win some prizes, but access mentors and advisors, or job fairs that we put on where companies in the network are able to hire new customer service representatives or chief operating officers or others. So it's a variety of events, it's membership programs, and lastly, profiling people in our media on our podcasts, like the one with you that we just released last week, or our magazine, Capitalist for Capitalism. And we have members who are going to be launching a blog to get more content out sooner than later. So for anyone who isn't at the point where they have $1 billion company yet that's either gone public or going to go supersonic, we want to help them out in the early stages. And so encourage people to just reach out to us to come out to an event or to start subscribing to the magazine to see what else is going on in the network.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier a goal to have 1 million business owners. Talk a little bit more about the vision. What's you're looking back in 5 years, where are you going to be? Or you're looking ahead to 5 years. What's the grand vision? What's the next cool thing?
So we have 3 metrics of success for what we're trying to do here. The first is build this movement of capitalists for capitalism, as we say. Get to 1 million business leaders out there who are being great representatives of, advocates for, and collaborators in capitalism. The second thing then, tying in with us knowing that the responsibility of every business person is to succeed in business, is we want that network to be creating $1 trillion of value in the economy. And we want the relationships and the opportunities in the network to be facilitating that for them. So we want to help them succeed. And lastly, we know that the perception of capitalism is negative right now. We started this conversation on that point. I don't know if you saw, but Gallup every year surveys Americans to see how many people support or oppose capitalism. And last year, there was the lowest approval rating of capitalism in America since they started doing this survey over 20 years ago. I believe it's actually under 50% for the first time of people in America who support capitalism. We want to change that. We want to get that poll back up to the highest rating they've ever had, to get the public supporting capitalism. And that comes down to getting this network to share their stories, to get people who are working for them, who are buying from them, who are reading about them, to understand the positive impact that they're having, and work with people to not only embrace capitalism intellectually, but to want to be participants in it themselves. And so create a self-reinforcing cycle of bringing them into being capitalists for capitalism themselves, generating more value, and changing hearts and minds for this incredible system.
Yeah, I think this is powerful and a very good caveat to our lightning round. So we like to ask every guest the same 3 questions. Now, the goal is 90 seconds or so on each one. But like I often say, accountability is pretty low. But here we go. I like to get people thinking about legacy by helping them, asking them to picture themselves, hopefully decades from now, lying in your bed, knowing you're in your final days. You're looking back. How would you know, looking back, that you've had a life well lived?
So in addition to achieving those 3 goals that I just laid out, at the end of the day, I think it comes down to impacting the people around us and helping them lead purposeful lives. I would want to know that my family, my loved ones, the people that I'm working with, who I love as well. That's one of the exciting things about this network. I love all of the leaders who are a part of this, that they feel as though I help them accomplish what they want to in the world, and to give them the platform to share this with others as well. That would be a life well lived for me.
Awesome. Now completely different. 90 seconds on any topic that's been interesting you lately. It just needs to be off topic. So we're not talking capitalism now. Maybe it's a hobby, a good book you've read, whatever's taken you sort of down the rabbit hole recently.
Well, you and I think your audience will appreciate the fact that I'm doing something called Exodus 90 right now, which is a structure for men to explore asceticism, fraternity, and prayer in a really deep way. And it's leading me to really deeply study. Before I did this, I was getting really into orthodoxy in Christianity. We're going through the book of Exodus as a part of this program. And it's leading me to do a lot of reflection on how to eliminate the dopamine hits that we get so much in modern society, how to appreciate the little things in life, how to stay focused on what really matters, and to be committed to a really purposeful life. And the role that asceticism plays in that, giving things up, giving up warm showers for 90 days, giving up food, literal fast days, several days. Today's one of them for me that is meant to keep us focused on the things that are important. Giving up social media, television, things like that entirely in order to stay focused on work, family, and purpose in life. And that, I think, is really important. I'm appreciating not just the study, but the whole experience with this. And since you haven't heard of this yet, Kurt, I think you would really enjoy it. Check out Exodus 90. It's been a great program already so far.
That's new, and I will check it out. I think there's something to be said about this idea of, recognizing the sort of dopamine hits that social media and other parts of our society bring us. I'm so conscious of my kids at age 3 or 5, keeping them away from particularly, cell phone screens. We do show some videos here or there, but we try to keep them away. We don't want them watching a lot of television because we want them learning how to entertain themselves and be creative. And while we're doing all that, it occurred to me I need to take my own medicine, right? I don't want to teach them, well, this cell phone is just an adult thing. When you're an adult, you can engage in these behaviors. And so, I've made some efforts to do that. I bought this thing called the Brick, which I highly recommend, that you can tap and it shuts off apps that you tell it to. So it shut off social media. And I found myself days at a time sometimes not having to use it. Now, unfortunately, my cell phone's not the only place I could get on Facebook. But, it's walking away from that sort of constant desire to get that sort of quick feeling that you get from, doom scrolling at midnight. I think such a powerful thing. So I will check it out. And see what I can learn about it. I think it's interesting there, reading the book of Exodus while you're at it. That's interesting.
It's the whole idea of freeing ourselves from the constraints of the pharaohs, including the pharaohs inside of us. And yes. I think you will really like it, Kurt.
All right. So last thing, but maybe most important thing. So I want you to pretend that no one has heard anything you've talked about on the whole podcast. So somebody just hit the fast forward button and they hit on this moment. 90 seconds on who are you, what is Liberty Ventures, who should be involved in Liberty Ventures, and how do they get a hold of you?
So I'm someone who believes in the power of the human spirit and the importance of liberating that in order to lead a meaningful life and advance humanity forward. And that is best embodied systematically in capitalism. And too often, capitalists themselves are the least likely to actually stand up for capitalism. And miss out on the opportunities to work with others in business who share their common commitments to principles like respect for individual agency, mutual collaboration, meritocracy, and others. And so the Liberty Ventures Network exists to bring together the whole ecosystem of business leaders, investors, executives, and entrepreneurs who share that commitment to the principles of capitalism and liberty and find ways to work together to create real value in the world, generate wealth from those partnerships, and leverage that then to make the world freer and more prosperous. And we would love to welcome anyone who is listening to this to get involved by coming out to an event, subscribing to our magazine, or just reaching out to share what you're doing to make the world freer, more prosperous through business, so we can find ways to support you and connect you with others who want to help you on that journey.
I love it. Alexander, thank you so much for being on the show. And for those of you who are tuning in, thank you. We invite you to join our community at libertyspenders.com. If you love what you're hearing, please like and subscribe to help other people find this content. And until next time, we'll see you soon.